morning, everyone. It's Robert from On My Turntable. Hoping you had a great morning this morning. It is Monday morning. As always, a coffee kind of morning. Cheers, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Here today to share my Led Zeppelin collection with you. I don't have all their studio albums. I'm missing a couple, but I have the majority of them, plus a compilation and a live album that I'm going to share with you. For those of you that don't know, or the minority that don't know Led Zeppelin, English rock band formed in '68. You got Robert Plant on vocals, Jimmy Page on guitar, John Paul Jones on keyboards and bass, and John Bonham on drums. Their lineup never changed through their 8 studio albums. They had a few guests, musicians appear on their albums, but the core of the group remained the same throughout their career. You've got heavy guitar-driven riffs, influences of blues and folk music throughout their music. One of the pioneers of hard rock and heavy metal, along with bands like Deep Purple and Uriah Heep. Led Zeppelin was formed from Jimmy Page's previous band, the Yardbirds, and they initially were known as the New Yardbirds, but then they signed a deal with Atlantic Records. They changed their name to Led Zeppelin. But at first they weren't very popular with the critics, and then eventually, slowly, they became more commercially successful and became one of the most successful rock bands of the 70s. Again, as I said earlier, their lineup never changed for their 8 studio albums, and it's hard to believe they only put out 8 albums. You'd think a big band like that would put out dozens and dozens of albums, but their time frame wasn't that large to produce that many albums. And as I mentioned earlier in a couple of videos, I'm slowly replacing my CDs, some of them, not all, with vinyl. So I did, and I have the CD version of Led Zeppelin 1. I'm not sure what to do with this because it still sounds great. I think I'm going to keep this one. But I did manage to find a vinyl version. This is a newly remastered version of Led Zeppelin 1 on, again, remastered by Jimmy Page. Classic 1969 debut on 180 gram vinyl. With my new inner and outer sleeves on there. The debut album by Zeppelin, released January 1969. Now this has nothing to do with Zeppelin, but I did manage to find a vinyl version of Black Sabbath's debut album as well. And I'm probably going to trade this one in because it's just a regular version of this amazing band and album. Nothing to do with Led Zeppelin, but I just wanted to show you that I'm slowly, eventually replacing my CDs with vinyl. So I'm happy to have this copy. Put that one over there. So Zeppelin 1, as I mentioned, is the debut album by Led Zeppelin, released 1969 in January 13th to be exact, in the U.S., and March 31st, 69 in the U.K. Apparently, if you find a blue copy, it's worth like $5,000. It's very rare, but there are some copies out there. I was watching Dylan from Noble Records, and he's got a copy. And apparently there has to be some other criteria to make it $5,000. His, he feels, was like $2,500, something like that. But it's an amazing debut. Recorded between September and October 1968, shortly after the band formed. It's kind of a mixture of original material. You've got contemporary blues and folk songs. The band was only paid from Jimmy Page and Peter Grant, their massive gorilla of a manager. They were only paid like £1,782 sorry, 1,782 pounds, not dollars, pounds, equivalent to about 37,000 to make this album. you've got, again, Robert Plant on lead vocals and harmonica, John Paul Jones on bass and keyboards, John Bonham on drums, mixed by Glyn Johns, who was influenced and worked with the Beatles. Iconic album cover showing the Hindenburg disaster. I guess this was designed by George Hardy. It became an immediate commercial success both in the U.S. and U.K. You got Good Times, Bad Times, Communication Breakdown as the only single released outside of the UK. Jimmy Page doesn't like a lot of singles released, but over time and FM radio, this is a classic, became a classic for sure. So happy to have that in my collection. Some of the others I'm going to be replacing with are the next two. Led Zeppelin 2, to be exact. Second album released by Zeppelin 1969 in October 22nd in the US and October 31st in the UK. Again, produced by Jimmy Page. One of the band's heaviest albums. 6 of the 9 songs were written by the band. Other 3 were covers like blues songs, Willie Dixon and Howlin' Wolf. Whole Lot of Love was released as a single, became a top 10 single, and again another commercial success for the band. This is amazing album. Whole Lot of Love, The Lemon Song, Thank You, Heartbreaker, Ramblin' On, Moby Dick, Bring It Home. Amazing album. It reached 12 times platinum. That's how good this album was. Then you got Led Zeppelin 3. Again, I'm going to replace this one if I can find a copy of it. This is a October 5th, 1970 release. There were some strings on this one. John Paul Jones became a talented multi-instrumentalist. He played keyboards and stringed instruments and synthesizers, double bass. Again, produced by Jimmy Page. Mixture of straight-ahead rock and roll, mixture of folk and acoustic music. You got the Immigrant Song, Gallows Pole, That's the Way, and Gallows Pole, of course, based on a traditional English song. One of the most anticipated albums of the 70s, an instant commercial success. This was kind of a turning point for the band. You got the Immigrant Song, Friends, Celebration Day, Since I've Been Loving You, Tangerine, Hats Off to Roy Harper. I've got to find a vinyl version of this one for sure. My introduction to the band way back when I was a kid, a couple years ago, is Zeppelin 4 or the Untitled album or Zozo. This became one of my favorite albums of that era. I did find a vinyl version. I've had a vinyl version for quite a while actually. I'm not sure where I got the CD version, but 1971 release, and again produced by Jimmy Page. Includes the big hit Stairway to Heaven, an FM staple, overplayed, commercial success. They decided their album would become Untitled, and they used 4 symbols, the Zozo, Z-O-S-O or Z-O-S-O, chosen by each of the band members. There was a guest singer, Sandy Denny, on the song Battle of Evermore on this one. Ian Stewart from the Rolling Stones played on Rock and Roll. Then you got, there's a cover on here, When the Levee Breaks by Memphis Minnie. Again, huge commercial success. One of their best-selling albums ever. 37 million albums worldwide. And listed as one of the greatest albums of all time, which I totally agree. I love this. I love the cover. Happy to have this one in my collection. A remarkable album. I don't have Houses of the Holy. I need to get that one, the fifth album by the band, 1973 release in the US, 1973 March 30th in the UK. But I do have Physical Graffiti. I've got 2 copies of it, both on CD. This is the anniversary edition, the 40th anniversary edition. So I'll keep this one for sure, as well as the vinyl version of this one. The 6th album by the band, released as a double album in February of 1975 in the US, and February 28th in the UK on the Swan Song label again. Originally it was only going to be a 3-sided album, but they included, to make it a double album, they included they included unreleased tracks from Zeppelin 3, Zeppelin 4, and Houses of the Holy. You got rock, progressive rock, rock and roll, folk. It took a long time for this to be released because of the cover. It took a long time to make the cover. As you can pull the cover out, and it makes all kinds of different images on here. Commercial success, instant commercial success, 16 times platinum for this one. It's an amazing one. Then Presence, the 7th album by Zeppelin, March 1976 in the US, and April 2nd, 1976 in the UK. Even though it was a commercial success, the critics kind of panned it. It was one of their lowest selling albums, and Robert Plant was ill at the time. He was injured in a car accident. They couldn't tour. The tour was canceled. The entire album was completed in a few weeks. Jimmy Page, of course, put in all kinds of hours mixing and producing this album. The centerpiece is a hypnosis piece focused on a mysterious black object called the Object. Most of the tracks were written by Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. So the band really didn't have much influence on the rest of the other 2 members. Didn't have much influence on this album, but I like it. It's a decent album. It's not my favorite by the band, but it's decent for sure. I'm Missing In Through the Outdoor, the 8th studio album by the band, only recorded in 3 weeks in 1978, and then released 1979 in the US and August 24th in the UK. And I'm missing Coda as well, their final album, their 9th and final album. It kind of their first compilation album. It includes a collection of rejected tracks and live tracks, released November 26, 1982. And also it was released 2 years after John Bonham's death. But I do have The Song Remains the Same, the soundtrack of the recording of the concert film of the same name, 1973 release. Recorded in 1973, released in 1976. It 3 nights of concerts in New York Madison Square Garden during their 1973 tour. Apparently this is dilapidated movie house where the group rehearsed for the 1973 tour. You've got some tracks on here that weren't included in the that did not appear in the film Celebration Day. Also, it didn't include the album did not include several songs from the film, including Black Dog, Since I've Been Loving You, Heartbreaker, Bonnier Stomp, and Autumn Lake. Some tracks were recorded at Madison Square Gardens weren't included in the film either. Over the Hills, Misty Mountain Hop, The Ocean, and Thank You. But happy to have this one in my collection. And finally, I've got called the Mothership compilation album released in 2007. It's a including songs that were chosen by Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, and John Paul Jones. You've got Good Times, Bad Times, Communication Breakdown, Dazed and Confused, Baby Man Gonna Leave You, Whole Lot of Love, Ramblin' On, Heartbreaker, Immigrant Song, Since I've Been Loving You, Rock and Roll, Black Dog, When the Levee Breaks, Stairway to Heaven. That's all on disc 1. Disc 2 is The Song Remains the Same, Over the Hills and Far Away, Dire Maker, No Quarter, Trampled Underfoot, Houses of the Holy, Kashmir, No One's Fault But Mine, R. Kelly's Last Stand, In the Evening, and All My Love. There's the track list there. It's a great compilation album, for sure. I mean, if someone just wants to find out about Led Zeppelin and learn what their music's like, this is a great one to pick up. And, yeah. So there you have it, guys. There's my look at Led Zeppelin and the studio albums that I have and the compilation albums that I have in my collection. Have yourself a great rest of the day. Love you all. We'll talk again soon. Bye now.